My boyfriend live-streamed his ex-girlfriend's party, laughing as she asked, "Should I even stay away from him?" I replied in the chat, "Then don't." Then I texted the wedding venue and canceled everything. My name is Claire Donovan. I was 32 years old, and until that Thursday night, I thought I was 1 month away from marrying the man I trusted most. His name was Ethan Wells. He was 31, charming in the quiet way people mistake for harmless. He remembered birthdays. He held doors open. He knew exactly how to lower his voice when he wanted people to believe he was sincere. And for almost 4 years, I believed him. I believed we were happy. I believed the endless wedding planning, the late-night debates over table linens, the guest list arguments, the floral samples spread across our kitchen counter were all part of the boring, beautiful work of building a life with someone. It turned out that for one of us, it was never a life. It was a performance. That Thursday night, I was home alone in our apartment, paying the final deposit for the caterer. The room was quiet except for the soft clicking of my laptop keys and the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, rain pressed softly against the windows, blurring the city lights into long, golden streaks. I remember feeling strangely proud, not excited or nervous, just quietly satisfied that another piece of our future had finally fallen into place. Then my phone buzzed. "Ethan Wells is live on Instagram." I frowned. Ethan had told me he was going out with the guys for a quiet drink before the wedding chaos swallowed our lives completely. But the thumbnail wasn't a bar at all. Pink lights, champagne, loud music, and before the video even finished loading, I recognized Vanessa's laugh. I tapped the notification. The screen opened to a shaky live stream, clearly filmed by Ethan himself. Vanessa stood in the center of a rented party house wearing a glittering silver dress, her cheeks flushed, one hand wrapped around a bottle of champagne. She was surrounded by friends. Standing among them was my fiancé, completely at ease, as if he belonged there instead of walking away. Someone shouted, "Okay, real talk, Vanessa. You really letting him get married?" The room erupted in laughter. My fingers went cold. Vanessa leaned toward the camera, her glossy lips curving into a slow, knowing smile. "Claire's great, I guess," she said. The words unsettled me less, because they were cruel, and more because they were so casual. She spoke about me as though I were an inconvenience she expected to disappear on my own. Ethan laughed behind the phone. Vanessa lifted the champagne bottle again. "She's stable," Vanessa continued, dragging out the word. "She has the job, the apartment, the whole responsible wife package." More laughter. Someone off-screen shouted, "But is she fun?" Ethan didn't shut it down. He didn't say my name with respect. He didn't end the stream. He just laughed again. A thin, polite laugh. The kind people use when they want to look innocent while still enjoying the cruelty. Then Vanessa looked directly into the camera. "Honestly," she said, blinking slowly, "should I even let him marry her?" The room exploded. "Don't do it! Take him back! Run, Ethan!" The chat flew by with laughing emojis, hearts, fire symbols, people tagging friends, people begging for drama. And there he was, my boyfriend, the man I was supposed to marry in a month, holding the camera as if none of it was wrong, letting another woman turn our engagement into entertainment. I expected anger, maybe even tears. Instead, everything inside me went strangely quiet. A switch clicked inside me. One moment I was a woman planning a wedding. The next, I was a woman watching the truth arrive on a live stream. I stared at Ethan's face in the corner of the frame, half lit by pink neon, smiling at Vanessa, like my humiliation was harmless as long as everyone kept laughing. My thumb moved before my heart caught up. From my own account, with my own face and name visible, I typed one sentence into the chat. "Then don't." I watched it appear. For half a second, the room kept laughing. Then someone screamed, "Oh my God." Vanessa's smile fell first. Then Ethan's face moved sharply into frame. His eyes widened. "Claire?" I closed the app. The apartment went silent. My hands were not shaking. That scared me more than anger would have. I opened my messages and found our wedding coordinator, Deborah. She had sent me 3 cheerful emails that week about centerpieces and seating charts. I typed carefully, "Hi, Deborah. This is Claire Donovan. Please consider this message my formal notification that I am canceling the wedding scheduled for October 12th. I understand the deposits are non-refundable. Please confirm receipt of this message. Thank you." I pressed send. Then I opened our shared wedding spreadsheet. The spreadsheet contained every detail we'd spent months planning. Budgets, vendor contacts, hotel reservations, guest lists, and honeymoon information. Everything we had built together, line by line. I made a private copy. Then I returned to the original file, clicked share, found Ethan's email, and removed access. The first call came less than a minute later. Ethan called first. When I didn't answer, Vanessa tried. Within another minute, one of Ethan's friends called, followed immediately by Ethan again. A text popped up. "Claire, answer the phone." Another text followed. It was a joke. A few seconds later, another appeared. "You just embarrassed me in front of everyone." I looked at that message for a long time. The message told me everything. His first emotion wasn't guilt. It was embarrassment. That was when I knew I had done the right thing. I put my phone face down on the counter and walked into the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of ice water, took one slow sip, and listened to the rain ticking against the glass. The wedding was not over because of one joke. It was over because when the joke began, he smiled. I slept better than I expected that night. I was hurting. But for the first time in months, the uncertainty was finally gone. For weeks, maybe even months, there had been tiny moments that refused to fit together. Ethan staying late after work more often, smiling at his phone before locking the screen whenever I walked into the room, telling me I was overthinking whenever I asked simple questions. I had convinced myself that wedding stress made everyone act differently. Now I wondered if my instincts had been trying to warn me all along. When I woke up Friday morning, my phone looked like a disaster zone. My phone was flooded with 37 missed calls, dozens of text messages, voicemails, and notifications from every social media app I owned. Most were from Ethan. Some came from numbers I didn't recognize. One was from Vanessa. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened the confirmation email Deborah had sent overnight. Your cancellation request has been received. The words were strangely comforting. There was no taking them back. The decision was real. The wedding was over. I forwarded the confirmation to Ethan's parents. His father had contributed toward the venue deposit, and I believed he deserved to know exactly where the money had gone before someone rewrote the story. I wrote only 3 words, for your records. I didn't accuse Ethan or explain myself. Around 5 that afternoon, I heard Ethan's key slide into the apartment door. The lock clicked. His suitcase rolled across the hardwood floor. Then silence. He stood in the entryway staring at me. I was sitting on the living room sofa reading a novel, exactly where he'd left me the previous afternoon. His face was pale. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. He looked like someone who hadn't slept at all. You canceled it. I calmly marked my page before looking up. Yes. Claire. His voice cracked. What the hell were you thinking? I studied him for a long moment. What was I thinking? He nodded. You destroyed everything. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked quietly, did I? His jaw tightened. It was one stupid live stream. Every excuse earned the same calm response. No. The quieter I became, the more desperate he sounded. Finally, he threw both hands into the air. It was a joke. The word echoed through the apartment. I set my book on the coffee table. Was it a joke when Vanessa called me stable, like it was an insult? He didn't answer. Was it a joke when everyone told you to leave me? Silence. Was it a joke when you stood there smiling while another woman asked if she should stop you from marrying me? His mouth opened, closed again. You never stopped her. I didn't know what to say. You could have said my fiancé deserves respect. I was trying not to make things awkward. I stared at him. You were more worried about making your ex uncomfortable than protecting the woman you planned to marry. His shoulders sagged. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. He looked toward the window instead of at me. It got out of hand. No. I shook my head slowly. It revealed exactly what was already there. His breathing grew heavier. You embarrassed me. The sentence hung in the air. Of everything that had happened, that was what he chose. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I hurt you. Not, I can't believe I let that happen. Just, you embarrassed me. I leaned back against the sofa. Ethan, hundreds of people watched your ex question our relationship while you laughed. I commented one sentence. You turned my engagement into public entertainment. I ended the performance. He rubbed both hands over his face. You don't understand what happened after you left. I don't need to. Vanessa was shocked. I imagined she was. My friends started yelling. I'm sure they did. The live stream ended. Eventually. His frustration boiled over. Why are you acting like you don't care? The question surprised me. Because I did care. I cared enough to cancel a wedding. I cared enough to lose thousands of dollars instead of spending decades married to someone who thought humiliation became harmless if enough people laughed. But I no longer cared about protecting his version of events. I loved you, I said quietly. I believed every promise you ever made. I defended you whenever people said relationships change after marriage. I imagined growing old with you. I paused, and then I watched you smile while someone else made me the punchline. His eyes filled with tears. I never wanted to lose you. No, I nodded once. You just didn't think you would. For the first time since he walked inside, he had nothing to say. The silence stretched between us. Finally, he whispered, What happens now? We separate our lives. Claire, the apartment lease needs to be addressed. The vendors have already been notified. I'll return anything that belongs to you, and you'll return everything that belongs to me. His face tightened. You're really serious. I became serious the moment I realized our marriage wasn't. He walked into the bedroom without another word. Drawers opened. Closet doors slammed. Suitcases zipped. Every sound echoed through the apartment that had once felt like home. An hour later, he carried 2 large suitcases into the hallway. Before leaving, he stopped beside the front door. I hope someday you realize this wasn't worth throwing everything away. I met his eyes. It wasn't one live stream that ended us. He frowned. Then what was it? The fact that you still think the live stream is the problem. He stared at me for several long seconds. Then he walked away. The elevator doors closed. I waited until I heard them reach the lobby. Only then did I allow myself to cry. Grief has strange timing. It waited until the elevator doors closed before finally catching up with me. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was his best friend, Marcus. Claire, you deserve to know something. Attached to Marcus's message was a screen recording. Not the live stream I'd already watched, but footage captured after I'd closed the app. I stared at the file without opening it. Somehow, I already knew it was going to make everything worse. I didn't open the video right away. Instead, I placed my phone on the kitchen counter and stared out the window. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city washed clean beneath a pale evening sky. For the first time in nearly 4 years, the apartment was completely silent. There was no music drifting from Ethan's office, no television in the background, and no voice asking what we should order for dinner. The silence should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt honest. After nearly 20 minutes, I picked up my phone again and pressed play. The recording began only seconds after I'd left the live stream. The camera was still running. Vanessa looked straight at Ethan. What the hell was that? Someone laughed nervously. Another friend whispered, I think she was actually watching. Ethan ran both hands through his hair. She'll calm down. Vanessa frowned. No. Then came the sentence that changed everything. You should probably go after her. Ethan shrugged. Not yet. 2 ordinary words, yet they told me everything. He wasn't rushing to fix what he'd broken because he never believed I would actually leave. He took another drink while his friends argued over whether someone should call me. One woman asked quietly, Do you think she actually canceled the wedding? Ethan smirked. She won't. Another laugh. I know, Claire. The video ended there. I watched those final seconds 3 more times. Each replay made the truth clearer than the last. He hadn't believed I would leave. Some part of him had always assumed I would forgive him. Always assumed I would absorb the embarrassment, explain away the disrespect, and eventually convince myself that love required patience. That illusion had died before the live stream even ended. The following Monday, my phone buzzed with another unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Claire? A calm male voice spoke. My name is Jack Wells, Ethan's father. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. No. There was a pause. I've seen the recording. I frowned. What recording? The entire live stream. Another pause. Ethan finally showed it to us. I closed my eyes. I see. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. His voice sounded older than I remembered. We raised him to know better. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he asked, May I buy you coffee? I don't think that's necessary. It's not to change your mind. It's because I don't want to hear one version of this story from my son for the next 20 years. That made me smile despite myself. We agreed to meet the following afternoon. The cafe was quiet. Jack was already sitting near the window when I arrived. His shoulders seemed heavier than they had at our engagement party only months earlier. He stood as I approached. Thank you for coming. We ordered coffee. For several minutes, neither of us mentioned Ethan. Finally, Jack slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check. I looked up. What is this? My contribution toward the deposits you lost. I pushed it back. I can't accept this. You can. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't yours either. I looked at the check again. It isn't about the money. I know. His expression softened, but I refused to let my son's choices become your financial burden. I folded my hands together. I already accepted I'd lose the deposits. Jack nodded slowly. That's exactly why I wanted to help. The conversation drifted toward wedding plans that would never happen. Eventually, Jack sighed. I asked Ethan one question. I looked at him. I asked whether he ever defended you during that live stream. I already knew the answer. He couldn't. Jack looked out the window. He kept saying everyone was drinking. I said nothing. He kept saying Vanessa didn't mean anything by it. Still nothing. Then I asked why he was there in the first place. Jack finally met my eyes. He couldn't answer that either. Neither could I. Because some questions don't have complicated answers. Only uncomfortable ones. When we finished our coffee, Jack stood. I won't ask you to forgive him. I'm not ready. I didn't expect you to be. As he reached for his coat, he hesitated. There is one thing you should know. I waited. Ethan and Vanessa dated for nearly 6 years. I know. They stayed in contact. I knew that too. Jack's face darkened. What I didn't know, he stopped, was how often. A cold feeling settled into my stomach. What do you mean? He admitted they never completely stopped seeing each other. I stared at him. According to Jack, they stayed in touch through lunches, birthdays, and yearly traditions that neither of them had ever truly let go of. I felt my fingers tighten around my coffee cup. What tradition? Jack looked genuinely ashamed. Every year on the anniversary of their first date. He swallowed. They still had dinner together. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because I thought Ethan loved Vanessa, but because I suddenly understood why he'd never wanted to tell me everything. The live stream wasn't the beginning. It was simply the first time the truth happened where I could see it. Jack quietly continued. He insists nothing physical ever happened. I let out a slow breath. It doesn't matter. He frowned. It doesn't? I shook my head. If you spend years protecting a relationship you claim is over. I stood, slipping my purse onto my shoulder. Oh, then it was never really over. Jack closed his eyes. I was afraid you'd say that. It isn't anger anymore. It's clarity. As I walked toward the exit, my phone vibrated once more. A message from Ethan. Claire, please. There are things you still don't know. I stared at the words for several seconds before locking the screen. For weeks, Ethan had revealed the truth, only when he could no longer hide it. Now he was the one desperate to explain everything. But by then, explanations no longer mattered. I ignored Ethan's message. Not because I wasn't curious. Because I had finally realized something that should have been obvious much sooner. Whenever Ethan said, There's something you don't know. What usually followed was another carefully edited version of the truth. Ethan rarely told one enormous lie. Instead, he buried the truth beneath dozens of smaller omissions until the full picture became almost impossible to recognize. By the end, you weren't arguing over one secret. You were trying to untangle dozens of them. 3 days later, I received an email from our landlord. The subject line read, "Lease responsibility, apartment 14B." I opened it immediately. Both tenants remain legally responsible for monthly rent until a formal lease release is signed by both parties. The email contained nothing but the legal facts, stripped of emotion and impossible to argue with. I paid my half of the rent that afternoon. Ethan didn't. 5 days passed. Still nothing. So I sent an email to Ethan Wells. CC, Jack Wells. Subject, outstanding rent payment. Hi, Ethan. Your portion of this month's rent remains unpaid. As stated in our lease agreement, we are both legally responsible for the balance until your name is officially removed. Please transfer your portion by Friday so neither of us incurs penalties or damage to our credit. Thank you, Claire. I reread it once. An hour later, my phone rang. Ethan. This time, I answered. You copied my dad? His voice exploded through the speaker before I could say hello. I copied someone financially involved. You embarrassed me again. I closed my eyes. There it was. Again, embarrassment. Never accountability. Ethan, what? Have you paid the rent? Silence. I'm staying somewhere else. That wasn't my question. I shouldn't have to pay for an apartment I'm not living in. You chose to leave. You canceled our wedding. I canceled an event. You walked out. You packed your own suitcase. He let out an angry breath. You always twist everything. No, I remember everything. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he muttered, I'll figure something out. I hope you do. I ended the call. It lasted less than 3 minutes. Yet somehow I felt lighter afterward. Because for the first time since our relationship ended, I hadn't tried to fix the conversation. I had simply let his words reveal him. The next afternoon, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. Ethan's younger sister, Emily. She looked exhausted. When I opened the door, she offered a small, apologetic smile. Can we talk? I hesitated, then stepped aside. She sat carefully on the edge of the sofa, glancing around the apartment that still looked half occupied. I shouldn't be here. Probably not. She nodded. My parents don't know. I assumed. Emily folded her hands together. I came because Ethan won't listen to anyone. I remained quiet. He keeps saying you'll come back once you've calmed down. That almost made me laugh. He really believes that? He says you've forgiven worse. The sentence settled over the room like dust. I had. I remembered birthdays he'd forgotten. Business dinners he'd skipped because Vanessa needed advice. Weekend plans he'd canceled at the last minute. Late-night phone calls he insisted were harmless. Every time. I'd accepted the explanation. Because loving someone sometimes looks dangerously similar to making excuses for them. Emily looked at me carefully. I don't think he ever realized how much you overlooked. He didn't. He thought that's just who you were. I smiled sadly. It was. She reached into her purse. I found something. She handed me a folded receipt. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then I read the date. It was from a small Italian restaurant downtown. Exactly 1 month before Ethan proposed. 2 dinners. Wine. Dessert. Paid with Ethan's credit card. Across the bottom was a handwritten note. Happy anniversary. I looked up slowly. Where did you get this? It fell out of one of Ethan's old folders. My stomach tightened. He said it wasn't important. It is. Emily nodded. I thought so. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Then she quietly admitted. I asked him if he had dinner with Vanessa. And? He said yes. I closed my eyes. He said it was closure. I almost smiled. Closure. That word again. People loved using it to justify relationships they never truly ended. Emily looked ashamed. I'm sorry. You didn't do this. I should have said something sooner. Did you know? She shook her head immediately. No. I only learned after everything happened. I believed her. She had always been kind to me. Before leaving, Emily paused beside the front door. For what it's worth, she hesitated. Mom already told Ethan she won't support him if he keeps blaming you. That surprised me. Really? Emily nodded. She told him one sentence. What? A good man doesn't stand beside another woman while she humiliates the woman he claims to love. The apartment fell quiet again after she left. I read the receipt another time. The date wouldn't leave my mind. Just 1 month before asking me to marry him, he had celebrated another anniversary with Vanessa, then bought me an engagement ring. I wasn't competing with Vanessa. I never had been. I had simply been expected to accept the space she left behind. That evening, I began boxing up the last of Ethan's belongings. I packed his books, shoes, winter coats, and old photographs into labeled boxes until almost nothing of him remained. As I sealed the final box, I realized I no longer needed another piece of evidence. The livestream, the anniversary dinner, and Ethan's own excuses had already told me everything I needed to know. The hardest part wasn't discovering the truth. It was accepting how long I'd ignored it. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Jack Wells called just as I finished sealing the last moving box. I just came from Ethan's apartment, he said quietly. The word apartment caught my attention immediately. Even Jack no longer called it home. He moved into a furnished rental after leaving here. I figured. Jack sighed. I need to tell you something before he does. I remained silent. He admitted he never completely cut contact with Vanessa. I know about the anniversary dinners. You know? Emily showed me a receipt. Jack let out a long breath. I was afraid of that. But that's not why I'm calling. I waited. He finally admitted why he went to Vanessa's party. Every muscle in my body tightened. He said Vanessa invited him because she wanted one last chance to prove she was over him. I almost laughed. That makes no sense. I told him exactly the same thing. Jack's voice hardened. If someone is truly over you, they don't need a farewell party. No, they move on. Silence settled between us. Finally, he said quietly. He kept insisting he went because he didn't want to seem cruel. Cruel. Another convenient word. People who fear looking cruel often forget to ask whether they're actually being cruel. Jack. Yes? Did he ever tell Vanessa he was marrying me because he loved me? The silence lasted so long I already knew the answer. No, he finally whispered. I don't believe he ever did. After we ended the call, I sat alone in the apartment. The realization hurt less than I expected. Pain changes over time. What first feels unbearable eventually becomes clarity. 2 days later, my attorney emailed the final property agreement. We had never married, but untangling nearly 4 years together still required paperwork. Untangling 4 years together meant dividing furniture, closing shared accounts, canceling insurance policies, splitting wedding deposits, and even deciding who kept the streaming subscriptions. Relationships rarely end all at once. Sometimes they disappear one document at a time. I signed every document without hesitation. By then, there was nothing left to reconsider. An hour later, another email arrived. From Ethan. Subject. Please read. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Claire, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to understand something. I never cheated on you. I never slept with Vanessa. I never planned to leave you. I was trying to help someone who had once been important to me find closure. I realize now how that looked. I realize I embarrassed you. I'm sorry for that. If I could do it again, I would leave the party the moment things got out of hand. Please believe that. Ethan, I read it twice, then closed my laptop. He still didn't understand. The party had never been the real problem. It had simply exposed years of choices that always placed someone else's feelings ahead of mine. I didn't reply. Instead, I finished packing the last box of his belongings. When I opened the hallway closet, I found one final surprise. A framed photograph tucked behind an old suitcase. It had been taken nearly 3 years earlier. The picture showed Ethan smiling between me and Vanessa at a charity fundraiser. At the time, I'd thought it was harmless. Now I noticed something I'd never seen before. His hand. It wasn't resting behind my back. It was holding Vanessa's hand behind the three of us, where the camera couldn't see. When I tilted the frame toward the light, I realized two nearly identical prints had stuck together. I slowly separated them. The second photograph captured the moment, a fraction of a second later. This time, Ethan's fingers were clearly intertwined with Vanessa's behind my back. There was no misunderstanding anymore. I stared at the photograph for several seconds, then carefully placed it back inside the box. Not because I wanted to keep it, because I wanted him to know I'd found it. The next morning, he arrived exactly at 10. He came alone. There were no lawyers standing behind him, no family members trying to mediate. For the first time since everything collapsed, it was just the two of us. He looked exhausted. The neatly groomed man I'd once known had disappeared beneath an uneven beard and weeks of poor sleep. I came for the last boxes. They're by the door. Neither of us moved. Finally, his eyes landed on the framed photograph resting on top. His expression changed instantly. You found that. I did. It isn't what it looks like. I smiled sadly. You've said that about almost everything. He picked up the frame with trembling hands. Claire, I wasn't holding her hand. You were. It was just for a second. There always seems to be a second. He looked down. It meant nothing. I nodded. I believe you. His eyes lifted hopefully. Then I finished the sentence. But the fact that it meant nothing to you is exactly why it mattered to me. The hope disappeared from his face. He lowered himself onto the edge of a chair. I never wanted to lose you. I know. Ethan rubbed his forehead and stared at the floor for nearly a minute. I've been trying to explain myself for weeks. He laughed bitterly. Maybe the truth is simpler than every excuse I've made. I thought I could keep everyone happy. There it is. He frowned. What? The truth. I walked toward the window. You weren't choosing between me and Vanessa. You were choosing between honesty and comfort. He didn't answer. You kept choosing comfort. Several long seconds passed. Then he quietly asked, Is there really nothing left to save? I turned toward him. There stopped being something to save long before I canceled the wedding. He closed his eyes. For the first time since everything collapsed, Ethan stopped defending himself. He offered no excuses, blamed no one, and simply lowered his head. Maybe he finally understood why everything had fallen apart, or maybe he simply realized no explanation could ever change it. Without another word, he lifted the last box and walked out. The apartment door clicked shut behind him. This time, I knew it was the last sound our relationship would ever make. 4 months slipped by, far more quietly than I expected. Healing wasn't dramatic. It arrived through ordinary mornings that slowly stopped hurting. Weeks passed before I noticed the change. One morning I realized I'd slept through the entire night. A few days later I caught myself smiling without remembering why. That was when I knew healing had quietly begun. The apartment gradually became mine again. The wedding magazines disappeared. The engagement photos came down, and the spare bedroom slowly turned into the reading room I'd always wanted. The silence that had once echoed through every room now felt peaceful instead of empty. Life kept moving. So did I. One Friday afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Jack Wells. Subject: one last favor. I almost ignored it. Instead, I opened it. Claire, I know I promised not to involve you again. This isn't about reconciliation. Ethan finally accepted a job in another state. He's leaving next week. Before he goes, he'd like to return one final thing in person. If you're uncomfortable, I'll bring it myself. Either way, I wanted to ask instead of assuming. Jack. I stared at the message. There wasn't a trace of manipulation in it, only respect. I replied with a single sentence. You can bring it. The following Sunday afternoon, Jack arrived carrying a small wooden box. He looked healthier than the last time I'd seen him. Perhaps acceptance had found him too. We sat in my living room with coffee between us. He slid the box across the table. I found these while helping Ethan pack. Inside were handwritten letters, birthday cards, postcards from vacations, tiny notes I'd tucked into his lunch before difficult work presentations. Every memory I'd once believed had disappeared. They belonged to you. Jack smiled gently. He said he didn't deserve to keep them. I closed the lid. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Jack broke the silence. I owe you something. You don't. I do. He folded his hands together. I spent months asking myself where I failed as a father. I looked at him carefully. The answer surprised me. I waited. I taught Ethan to avoid conflict. He gave a tired smile. I praised him whenever he kept everyone happy. His expression grew distant. I forgot to teach him that sometimes keeping everyone happy means betraying the person who trusted you most. His words settled heavily between us. I don't hate Ethan. Jack nodded. I know. I loved him. I know that too. And that's exactly why I couldn't marry him. He looked down into his coffee. I understand now. As he stood to leave, he hesitated. He asked me one question before I came. What was it? He wanted to know whether I thought you'd ever forgive him. I considered it honestly. One day? Jack looked hopeful. I'll forgive him. His shoulders relaxed. But forgiveness doesn't reopen closed doors. The hope quietly disappeared again. I'll tell him. Please do. He thanked me and left. That was the last time I saw anyone from the Wells family. Or so I thought. Months later, I finally took the honeymoon trip to Italy. But this time, I went alone. The first morning in Florence, I wandered through narrow streets with no itinerary. There was no wedding itinerary to follow, no countdown hanging over me, and no compromises left to make. Just sunlight warming old stone buildings and the distant sound of church bells drifting through the city. I stopped at a small cafe overlooking a quiet square and ordered espresso. That evening, I stood on a bridge overlooking the Arno River as the sunset painted the water gold. Months earlier, I thought Italy would remind me of everything I'd lost. Instead, standing on that bridge, I realized I'd recovered far more than I'd lost. My confidence had returned. So had my peace, my instincts, and the self-respect I'd sacrificed for someone else's comfort. As I watched couples walk hand in hand across the bridge, I realized something that would have terrified the woman I used to be. I wasn't afraid of ending up alone. I was afraid of ending up with someone who made loneliness feel normal. Those are two very different futures. One requires patience. The other requires pretending. I chose patience. When I returned home, life continued quietly. Friends stopped asking about the wedding. The engagement ring had already been sold months earlier, helping recover part of the money I'd lost. I used the rest of my savings to renovate the apartment before eventually moving into a smaller place that felt entirely my own. One evening, nearly a year after the live stream, I ran into Marcus at a bookstore. After we talked for a while, he hesitated before speaking. Ethan asked about you. I smiled politely. I'm sure he did. He said losing you forced him to become honest with himself. I nodded. I hope that's true. Marcus looked surprised. You're not angry? I was. I picked up the novel I'd been browsing. But anger has an expiration date if you stop feeding it. As I walked toward the checkout counter, Marcus called after me. Do you ever regret canceling the wedding? I stopped for only a second. Then I looked back with the certainty that had taken me months to earn. I don't regret canceling the wedding. I smiled softly. I regret ignoring all the reasons I eventually had to. Outside, the evening air was cool. People hurried past carrying groceries, laughing with friends, planning ordinary lives. I hadn't lost my future that night. I'd rescued it. Looking back, people sometimes ask whether I regret typing those two words. I never have. Looking back, those two words were never meant for Vanessa. They were the permission I finally gave myself. Then don't. And for the first time in years, I finally listened.